everybody just a few more minutes. Hello, testing audio. Audio check, testing 1, 2, 3. We'll start in a few minutes. Hi, everyone. We're going to go ahead and get started now. So this is the WebEx presentation from the California Department of Education. And this particular segment that you're with joining us now is the new assignment monitoring system. And it's being presented by me, Roxanne Purdue. I'm a consultant with the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. And this is specifically about the California State Assignment Accountability System, or CalSAAS. And we're going to talk today about what CalSAAS looks like, how it's going to function in the future when it comes online, and how that will interact with the CDE's CalPAD system. So I've been with the Commission since 2001. So 18 years. I have a single subject credential in history with supplemented introductory English. And so you'll notice when I said that I have a history credential that now we don't issue those anymore. We issue social science credentials. So as we built this new system, we had to map it, code it, for every credential and authorization and subject area ever issued by the Commission to every course issued in California. So it's a big undertaking. So let's go ahead and talk about the new system. Before we get started, we've had a lot of questions in some of our other presentations about one of our new areas for an attribute. It's in both the CalSAAS system, and it's also now going to be in the CalPAD system as a selection for explanation on certain assignments. And so that new attribute drop-down selection would be course settings. Course settings occurs at the middle school level in grades 5 through 8. And I'm just going to briefly go over and give you just the briefest introduction to course settings and what they are and give you some examples. So course setting is in Education Code 44258.1. And essentially, it came about during a time where we moved from just only having junior high, elementary, junior high, high school settings. And they did a study called Caught in the Middle. And they were moving into middle school settings, grades 5 through 8. And when they made that move, they wanted to give the students the ability to have a crossover between that self-contained setting they have in the elementary before they moved into that departmentalized setting they have at the high school. And so they wanted to give them an in-between experience to bridge the gap between the two. So course settings takes it so that in grades 5 through 8, they come back to the same teacher at least twice during the day, and they stay with the same students for at least twice during the day. And that gives them a feeling of a little bit more like a self-contained classroom because they're seeing that same teacher more than once a day with the same group of kids. But at the same time gives them the same sense of a departmentalized setting where they're moving between different teachers and classes still in a departmentalized setting. At the same time, when they switched over to course setting models at the middle school, you had teachers who had been at the elementary school, grades K through 6, and suddenly your 5th and 6th grade teachers didn't have jobs at the elementary school anymore when they moved to the middle school 5 through 8 settings. And so there also was a need to preserve their jobs, which I'm sure you can imagine the unions were involved with that discussion. And so another consideration in course settings was ensuring that that teacher could serve and teach the same group of students for 2 or more periods a day, for 2 or more subjects a day to those same group of students. And that was called a course setting, but here's where it focused more on the teacher and not on the student. There was something within the course setting called a hanging 5th period. So for most teachers, they're going to have a 6-period day with 5 periods of teaching and 1 period of what we call prep time, where they do grading and lesson planning. So they have 5 teaching periods a day. So if they had two course settings, they would be teaching the same group of students for 2 or more subjects, and then they'd have another group of students for 2 or more subjects. That would take up 4 periods of their day, but they have an extra period there, a 5th period, without being part of a core. So what they did was create a hanging period where it could be any of the 2 subjects that were part of the core at the same grade level as the core could be taught to a different group of students in that 5th period. So if your core setting was social science and English to 6th graders, you could teach social science or English to 6th graders in your hanging period. Now, just because we call it a hanging 5th period doesn't mean it actually has to be a 5th period. So let's take a look at what it looks like on an actual schedule. This one we do consecutive periods on that top example, but it doesn't have to be consecutive periods. I just did it because it looks easier. So up at the top, we say the person has a TC2, which is a multiple subject credential, with an ELAM authorization. That's an English learner authorization for multiple subjects. So the first core is a math science core for 6th graders, and that's done at this 1st and 2nd period in this setting. So the same group of students stay for 1st and 2nd period for math and science with this teacher. Then they have a prep period and 3rd period, and then 4th and 5th period, they have a different group of students. That group of students in the 2nd core stay for math and science grades again, but a completely new group of students staying for 2 periods during the day for 2 different subject areas. And then they have a hanging period in 7th period where they can teach math or science to a different group of 6th graders. And that is a correct core. Now, a little bit more complicated master schedule down below. You have an educator who holds a multiple subject with an introductory supplementary authorization in science and an ELA1 authorization. That's an English learner authorization that lets you do departmentalized ELD. So this teacher teaches first period departmentalized ELD, which is authorized by their EL authorization, so that's okay. It doesn't have to be part of the core because they are authorized otherwise. Then they have a core that's second period and fifth period is a core. So the same group of students in second period come back in fifth period, and their core this time is Math English, grade 6. And that looks like it's the only core that happens for this teacher is that second and fifth period with the same group of students, and that's okay. In fourth period, instead, they're teaching science, grade 8. So that science class, those grade 8 students aren't coming back for anything else. They're not part of the core, but they're authorized by that supplementary authorization in science. So then they have a hanging period because they can always have a hanging period if they have a core. Their hanging period can be math or English, which is what it is in the core, grade 6. So a completely different group of students can come for math or English, grade 6. Another thing important to note is that it's not just the overall content, math. It has to be the exact same prep, what we call the same prep, so it should be the same lesson plan. So it wouldn't be Algebra 1 and pre-algebra because those would be two different lesson plans, even though they're both math content. So it really needs to be the same exact content in both classes, the hanging period and the core. Okay, that covers core settings. Now let's talk about what assignment monitoring looks like today. Right now today it's a very paper-heavy process. Oh, I've been leaning sideways. Hopefully you've been able to see me in the camera. Right now it's a very paper-heavy process. The district collects master schedules, course descriptions, duty statements, board authorizations, in the meeting minutes, all sorts of physical paper documentation that they collect from their elementary, middle, and high schools. And they collect all this documentation, and whether they scan that in and make it electronic or how they do it, it's still looking at all of that different paper documentation, and they submit that to the County Office of Education, who has the credential records, or the district also has the credential records on hand, actually. So then the county office compares the credential information with the assignment information they've got, and they determine whether each educator has a credential authorization and subject for each thing that they're teaching or serving in, because it's all certificated assignments, not just teaching classes. So if it's a certificated position, it's subject to assignment monitoring. So the county is the ultimate authority that decides if something's an appropriate assignment or what we call a misassignment. And the county reports it to the commission. The commission right now has 3 FileMaker databases that the county office reports to. The first one's called the 1/4 monitoring database. So right now, under assignment monitoring today, the education code requires that 1/4 of all of the certificated staff in the state be monitored each year, every year, and at the end of the 4 years, all of the state has been monitored. So 1/4 a year for 4 years, and the whole state's been monitored. So most counties choose to break that out by district. They do 1/4 of their districts each year. But they could do it by school site, for example, if they have a really large district that they want to break up into 1/4 segments by school site. But they can also just do it by certificated educators within the district and break it down that way. So it's up to them. The county gets to choose how they want to break up that 1/4. So they submit that report to the commission through that database. And then the education code also requires that they do annual monitoring of what we call the lowest 3 decile schools. So previously, there was an academic performance index, and schools were ranked 1 through 10, with 1 being the lowest and 10 being the highest. And in that decile ranking, schools that were ranked in the lowest 3 deciles, 1, 2, and 3, had to be monitored for assignment monitoring annually. And that's still in the education code today. So even though the Academic Performance Index ended, we still have to do the monitoring of those decile schools. So what that means is that we're pulling our decile information from schools that were ranked back in 2012. And so those same school sites from the 2012 ranking have been monitored every year since 2012, instead of being changed every 3 years like they had been in the past. So one thing about that we learned from our decile ranking is that annual monitoring, school sites that are monitored every single year annually instead of on the 1/4, have a lower rate of misassignment. So when we first started looking at the decile rankings, it was when the Williams settlement occurred. And so that was back in 2004. And back when the Williams settlement occurred in 2004 and we first started decile monitoring, when I pulled the data and reported that information to the legislature, we were at a rate of about 22% on misassignments for the state in the decile schools. Now we're down to a rate of 3%, so 22% to 3% when we did annual monitoring of those school sites. On the 1/4 monitoring, we're still at about 7 to 8% on misassignment rate. So we're at a higher rate on the 1/4 monitoring, even though it's not the low decile schools. And so then they have a third database that they report into. These are all online FileMaker databases, and the third one's called the Uncorrected Misassignment Database. So all misassignments are required to be corrected within 30 days. Anything that's been uncorrected is reported to the Commission as an uncorrected misassignment. So all of that then comes to the Commission for follow-up and reporting to the legislature and to the Commission commissioners. It gets reported biennially right now. So how is that going to change in the future? Well, first of all, what's wrong with assignment monitoring today? One of the things that is wrong with it today is that when we have that 4-year cycle on assignment monitoring, it's difficult to identify trends and areas of need. So one of the things that it tells us in assignment monitoring is it speaks to areas of shortage, difficulty in filling positions. It speaks to areas where we as a state have trouble understanding about authorization and assignment, like maybe at that core setting example that I gave where maybe there's some confusion. So there's different trends that you can see when you look at something annually that you can then address annually so that there can be improvements that you can't see when you're on 1/4 monitoring because you don't go back to that same school site until year 5. The paper process is really heavy, labor-intensive process right now, and it tells a lot of work for both the district and the county and the Commission. And the monitoring results are self-reported to the Commission right now, so there could be variability between how the identification occurs for the misassignment. And so those self-reported results are what go to other state and federal agencies on the Commission. So what's the need for changes to assignment monitoring? We have new federal reporting requirements under the Every Student Succeeds Act for the state plan. Misassignment is identified as an ineffective teacher on the state plan for ESSA, and so we need annual results for the state plan ESSA requirement reporting to the federal government. We have a disappointing academic performance index. I mentioned that before. The API that gives us our decile rankings is gone, and we're still using the 2012 ranking, so it's another need for a change. We now have the local control funding formula and the local control accountability plan that have occurred since we started assignment monitoring many years ago. And under priority 1 of the LCAP, misassignment data has to be reported. Also in the school accountability report card, misassignment data has to be reported. So all of these areas require misassignment data, and annual data would be needed whether it's for the LCAP or the SARC or for federal reporting requirements under ESSA. So having that 1/4 monitoring is really problematic. So what occurs with assignment monitoring tomorrow? Well, first of all, let me tell you that last year we had 2 bills for assignment monitoring. We had an assembly bill last year and we had a budget trailer bill last year. And the assembly bill last year made it through the Assembly Education Committee with no problem, and then it went into what we call a suspense file, where it was being held pending a review of budgetary analysis. And so there was concerns about funding the cost of the new system and the new monitoring process, the new CalSAAS that we're talking about. Well, at the same time that that bill was going through, another bill occurred, the budget trailer bill. And the budget trailer bill said, give the commission money to build the new CalSAAS system. So the budget trailer bill passed, but the assembly bill stayed in suspense and died in suspense. So we got the money to build the new assignment monitoring system, but we didn't have the assembly bill to change the monitoring from 1/4 to annual monitoring. So this year we brought forward a new Assembly Bill 1219, and it goes back to changing this to an annual monitoring process. We also have another budget trailer bill that brings about basically the same thing as done in budget trailer bill as the Assembly Bill, so it kind of has two chances at the pie. So with either one passes, we'll have annual monitoring of all educator assignments all throughout the state at every school in the state every year. It keeps the monitoring authority as primarily the County Office of Education to review the assignments for all local education agencies within their purview. The exception to that would be for charter schools. The monitoring authority would then be the chartering authority for that charter school, which might be the county office, but could also be the school district. There are designated timelines in the Assembly Bill that set out clear statutory timelines for all participants in the process that we'll get to in, a little bit later. There would be, for the first time, right now, charter schools are not part of the assignment monitoring system. They have their own section of the education code that requires that their assignments of teachers are periodically reviewed by their chartering authority. It doesn't define what periodically reviewed means, and they're not reported as part of the assignment monitoring process to the commission, so they're not right now part of the statewide picture on assignments in California. So this Assembly Bill and the budget trailer bill brings charter schools into the accountability system with all other public schools. It requires full transparency of all data. So right now we do the biennial report to the legislature, and that's about it. The new bill requires the commission to publish all assignment monitoring data on our website in data dashboards. And it's going to be able to be drilled down to the actual individual school site level, so it can be viewed by parents or educators or press or anyone who cares to look at the data. It won't be able to be viewed by individual educator, however, which brings us to the security feature, which protects the privacy of the individual educator and their personal data. Even on the commission's website, though, you can search for a teacher's credential by their name. It doesn't give their social security number, it doesn't give their address. The connection between the commission's data system and CDE's data system is what we call the SEED, the Statewide Educator Identification Number. And that helps, that unique identifier that we use between our two agencies helps us protect the social security number of the educator. Okay, so let's take a look at the CalSAAS. So what are our inputs into this data system? We have the CDE, Educator Course Assignment data, from CalPADS, as well as other data through CDE. So there's a lot of actual separate data points we get, like even from the CDS county district school data. We use that data as well. So there's different data points that we pull from CDE, but the primary one we do is the course assignment data. Then we take all the educator credential data from CTC, and those two data areas come together into the CalSAAS system by using the SEED to connect the two. So we know every educator in California and what they hold, and we know what classes they're teaching in and what students are in their classes. So what's outputted? What comes on an output are what we call exceptions. So there's an exception to those two areas. They don't match up. The one educator credential data doesn't authorize the course that's being taught. So an exception is what we call a questionable assignment. It's not necessarily a misassignment. It's something that is potentially a misassignment, but could be otherwise legally authorized. So there are ways to legally authorize a teacher to teach outside of their credential area, but we wouldn't have that in the commission's database. That would be locally known. and that's part of what the CalSAAS allows us to report on and know. So what happens to those exceptions or those questionable assignments? They come into the CalSAAS system and they're viewable by the LEA. And the LEA has an opportunity to review the assignments of all of the exceptions and provide a justification or an explanation for why that questionable assignment is not a misassignment. And so maybe they're going to say that they have them on a local assignment option that's been approved by their local governing board. We'll talk about local assignment options in a little bit, but there's different ways that the teacher might be authorized outside of their credential area. Then the County Office of Education has an opportunity then, or the monitoring authority, has the opportunity to review the justification provided by that LEA and make a final determination about whether that's a misassignment or not a misassignment. So it's not until the county makes their decision, the monitoring authority makes their decision, that we know whether something's a misassignment or whether it's not a misassignment, whether it's actually authorized by some other legal authorization. That information then that the county office reviews gets submitted to the Commission on Teacher Credentialing Administrator, and then the Commission collects the assignment information and finalizes the reports and results. So that's what's captured within the data system. So looking at those same inputs and outputs, let's talk about some of the words that we used. So once again, the word exception, what the system outputs when it compares the two data sources, it outputs exceptions. An exception is a potential misassignment or a questionable misassignment, and that's identified by the CalSAAS. And so that's a big, huge new thing. Remember we talked about in the assignment monitoring process today how it's very paper-heavy and self-reported. So right now, we're looking at master schedules, we're pulling up credential data, we're comparing the two, we're identifying misassignments as an individual county. Well, now it will be an actual data system that identifies those potential misassignments, and it's going to compare the CalPADS data that's been put in by the LEA, and it's going to compare the credential information data that's held by the Commission on Teacher Credentialing. So it'll take the CDE data, the CTC data, and the system will output the misassignments now instead of it being self-reported. And then a determination is made. That word may change, but basically determination, explanation, justification, these are all words you could use. But that's the method the LEA uses to justify why an exception, why it was identified but is still legally authorized. And we gave the example of local assignment options being one of the main areas there. Course setting is another example of an explanation that you might give of why it appears that that multiple subject teacher is teaching departmentalized English and departmentalized social science, but really it's part of the course setting, and so it's authorized. So that's another explanation that will be common. So then the monitoring authority user approves the determination and sends the report to the commission. So let's talk about the user structure in the CalSAAS. So you have your local education agency users, and for every entity, there's both a user and an administrator. So you have local education agency users and administrators. You have monitoring authority users and administrators. Once again, the monitoring authority is probably going to be your county. The LEA user and administrator is probably going to be your school district in most cases. And then you have your CTC users and administrators. The administrators can assign new users within their area, and they can also assign work to their users. So if I am monitoring authority administrator, I can invite my local education agency administrators to join the system. And then as a local education agency administrator, I can then invite my LEA users to join the system. There's no limitation on the number of users that can be in the system. There's no limitation for each county or district on the number of users or administrators. There's no limitation on the number the system can hold overall. So in terms of user creation, we went over this a little bit, but the CTC administrator first invites the monitoring authority administrators. So the Commission has a list of every monitoring authority administrator, which is going to be our County Office of Education Credential Analyst. That's the primary credential analyst for that county. And we'll send an invitation out for them to join the CalSAAS system. And they'll log in and create their user profiles. Once they've been invited as an administrator and they've created their user profile, they can then invite other monitoring authority users, so other users within their county that they can invite to work in the system, and they can assign those users work. And then so as an administrator, if I had three users in my county, I could divide up my districts among my users and have them just work certain districts, or I could divide up my schools and have them work just certain schools. So you could have them have read access to everything in the county, but only ability to edit and work those exceptions that are assigned to me by my administrator. Then the MA administrator, the monitoring authority administrator, also invites the LEA administrator. So both the MA user in their own county and the district administrator at the LEA. So if you are a county office, one of the things you want to make sure that you know is who, the email address, and who at your LEAs you would want to invite to be part of the CalSAAS system. So you need to find out who's going to be serving that role at your district. Once you have invited the LEA administrator and they've logged in and gotten permission as an LEA administrator, they can then invite LEA users. And once again, once they invite the users, they can assign work to them. So they can assign specific school sites for those users to work. Now, some of you are saying, but as a county, I'm it. There are no users. There's just me. And some of you at the district are saying the same. There's just me. I do all of the work by myself. There's not, users for me to assign. Well, do not worry. Anything that an administrator, anything a user can do, an administrator can do. So you don't have to have any users. You can do all the functions on your own as the administrator. So this just shows you what each of the users and administrators have the ability to do. And there's a lot here, but I want to remind you that in the Padlet that we've provided for you, these slides are in a PDF in the Padlet, so you can look up any of them again later if you want to. But basically, LEA user can work the exceptions that have been assigned to them by their administrator, including monitoring charter schools that have been assigned to them if applicable. And they can see the various reports that are associated with that district. The LEA administrator can assign other users and permissions to those users. They can work exceptions themselves also. They can also monitor charter schools if they would like. They submit charter reports to the Commission. So most reports are submitted by the MA, the monitoring authority, but the exception to that would be charter reports that are part of the LEA's monitoring authority. Those are directly submitted to the Commission by the administrator who's the chartering authority. And then they can also see any various reports that are associated with that district. The reports are actually quite comprehensive. We have a big report section for the CalSAAS. Reports are generated at every level. You can break it all the way down to a school site report, or you can have the report be up at a more aggregate level, up at a county level or at a state level. The reports have executive level reports where it's just pretty pictures and graphs and charts, all the way down to individual reports where you get the individual educator's name and their exception and the reason for the exception being justified. So you can pull your report to any level of detail you want. So then you have your MA user. They review the determinations that have been submitted by the LEA for those schools that have been, districts or schools that have been assigned to them by their administrator. They also can return to the LEA anything that LEA has provided as a justification or a determination. The MA can look at it and say, no, in order to approve this, I need to see more documentation, or I have questions. So So they can return something back to the LEA and ask for something more. They can ask for documentation, like a governing board agenda item, or minutes, excuse me. Might be documentation they want to have uploaded, transcripts they might want to have uploaded, a master schedule maybe on a middle school course setting they might want to have uploaded. So there's different things that they can request from the LEA. And then that can be returned from the LEA back to the MA for review. It can go back and forth as many times as you want. They can work exceptions themselves if needed. Remember, monitoring authority county offices have their own school sites too, especially those alt-ed sites. And then they can see the various reports. And then the monitoring authority administrator can do everything that the people below them can do, but they also have the ability to assign users and permissions to their monitoring authority users, and assign new LEA administrators, and then everything else. The only other thing they can do that's different from everybody else is that they're the ones who submit that very final report to the commission. So they're the ones who determine that everything has now gone back and forth enough times, it's all done, everybody's made their final determinations, and it's ready to be submitted to the commission as a final report. And that comes from the MA administrator. So what's the time frame for all of this in the new CalSAAS system? If the bill passes how it's set up right now, the LEA user has, from the day that the system has the data uploaded, the exceptions are uploaded into the system, into the CalSAAS system for viewing, the LEA has 60 days to review those exceptions from the time that they're uploaded. The monitoring authority has 90 days to finalize and make determinations on those exceptions once they review what the LEA has provided as justification. So the monitoring authority technically has 30 days then from the end of that 60 days. They have an additional 30 days to complete their work. But the CalSAAS system is a real-time system. So what does that mean? That means as an LEA, if I'm inside one educator and I'm providing a justification on one educator, the second that I save that one justification on that one educator, it's viewable by the monitoring authority. So in real time, not the next day, but in real time, as soon as I do it, the monitoring authority can view what I've done and saved as work under that educator. So that means that if I'm doing my work on day one, my monitoring authority can do their work on day one. That means, however, if I wait until day 59 to do my work, that means that my monitoring authority has to wait until day 59 to do their work, which is why we give them the additional 30 days. So when does this all occur? The CalSAAS launches the new system, and this is true whether the bill passes or not, because the authority to have the CalSAAS is built. How we collect the data, 1/4 or decile or annual for all, or charter schools, not charter schools, that all is subject to change depending on whether the bill passes or not. But the CalSAAS system itself is definitely happening. And there's annual monitoring that occurs in the current system now. It's just maybe segmented out by school sites so that it's 1/4 of them if the new bill doesn't pass. But either way, the CalSAAS launches in the 1920 school year. And that year, the 1920 school year, is used for user testing and fine-tuning, so it's a non-consequential year. So if you would like to be a tester, we need a county to join with a district and LEA in order for there to be a test group. So a district can't sign up to be a tester without their county, and a county can't sign up to be a tester without having at least one or more districts to partner with them. We can have an unlimited number of testers. So if you want to be a tester, your county needs to sign up and email the commission. They have their own email box with the commission, the counties do. They email the commission telling us they want to be a tester and telling us what districts will be testing with them. So we encourage all counties to contact their districts and ask them if they'd like to be a tester. And if you are a district and you'd like to be a tester, contact your county and let them know you'd like to be a tester, and then let the commission know. It's really to your advantage to be a tester in the new system. It gives you an idea of workload that's non-consequential. It lets you compare how your paper monitoring was doing compared to how the CalSAAS is outputting for you, where your areas are where there are holes in your process, so you can start looking at solutions. It lets you try out the new system when it's non-consequential. So if you happen to miss a deadline or something like that, it's non-consequential, it doesn't matter. So it's really to your advantage to be a tester, and once again, we can have unlimited number of testers. We hope the whole state tests. That would be great, that would be ideal. So in the new system, monitoring is important to note that is a snapshot of time. So there's the Fall 2 census date, which happens that first week in October. And that's true for the CalSAAS system, and that will be true for when we pull the data for the Commission's credential data. So we have had some people ask questions, well, it can take up to 50 days for a credential to be issued once the application is submitted to the Commission. So what about that? Well, the thing about the snapshot in time is that if an application is submitted with the requested issuance date of, let's say, September 1st. That application may take up to 50 days to be processed, but the actual issuance date for that document will still be that September 1st date that was requested. So when we pull the credential data, it's not about the date that the application was granted. It's about what the issuance date is of that document. So that September 1st date is still used as the issuance date for determining if an individual held the credential or didn't hold the credential on that Fall 2 census date. So work time at the Commission isn't going to be a problem because the exceptions for CalSAAS aren't input into the system until April. So even though the Fall 2 census date is that first week in October, the actual data from CalSAAS comes to the Commission from CDE in April. And no, we can't get it in there earlier than that, believe me, we'd like to. Okay, so how do you prepare right now? First of all is CalSAAS. CalSAAS is part of the driving data, so you need to make sure that your data is not dirty. Make sure that your data that's going into the CalSAAS system is as clean as it can be. Discover who's entering the CalSAAS data for your district and county. Your credential analyst should connect with that person. Your curriculum and instruction person should connect with that person. Maybe it is your curriculum and instruction person, but some districts are entering really clean CalSAAS codes that are really appropriate for the courses, and sometimes someone's just making their best guess, and it's maybe not the accurate CalSAAS codes for that particular course. And that's one of the things that a testing year can tell you. If something comes out as a misassignment and somebody else is saying, no, that teacher has the right credential, I know it for that course, and then you go back to the CalSAAS course and you see, oh, well, we coded it this way, but really it should have been that, that allows you to start looking at your CalSAAS codes and whether those are accurate. Attend your CalSAAS training, which you're doing right now, one of your CalSAAS trainings right now. You can send your inquiries right now about problems with, in coding in CalSAAS on hard-to-identify assignments. So once again, doing that now while it's all non-consequential for the CalSAAS system, even though it matters right now what you're putting in CalSAAS right now still. You can start gathering your justifications and determinations, particularly in non-consequential years, because sometimes you use the same ones from year to year for the same educators. So if you have teachers serving on local assignment options, you can start gathering your documentation for that right now. Your governing board minutes, because it's by resolution, so it can't be on the consent calendar. It has to be an action item. It can be recording information on all course setting assignments, you know, the master schedules that show a teacher's teaching on a course setting. Start gathering any documentation you have on why you believe an exception is otherwise legally authorized, even if it's not authorized by their credential. Sign up for testing. We talked about that. Make sure your voice is heard, because one part of the important part of testing is not just the advantages it can give you as county and district into looking at the new system, how it functions, but also providing feedback to the Commission and sometimes to CDE regarding CalSAAS, but feedback to the Commission on where you see problems with the new system so we can make improvements. It's not going to be, it's something we're definitely taking feedback on and making improvements on, and we'll be doing that in real time with our vendors. And then starting to connect with your charter schools. setting up those lines of communication with your charter schools. Right now, charter schools aren't being monitored under the assignment monitoring system, but if the new bill passes, they will be. So do you have contacts at those school sites? Do you know who to partner with at those school sites about the information? So these are all things to think about as you move forward with the assignment monitoring. Okay, so what's the new system going to look like? Before we get to that, I want to show you. In the Padlet, I have a lot of different resources I had put in there for you. So take a look through and look at some of the resources that we've included. But one of the ones I want to point out to you is a cheat sheet that I put in on local assignment options. And so in the CalSAAS system, part of the area that is under one of the new attributes is that you can choose to say that a particular teacher's assignment falls under one of these local assignment options in the education code. But you don't need to worry if you don't have that information ahead of time when you enter in your CalSAAS data. It's okay. It lets you be proactive if you can put it in that way. But if you can't, if that's not possible in your district or county, then the CalSAAS system allows you to put it in as justification after the fact too. So you can catch it both beforehand or afterwards. Now, the local assignment options chart that I put here are the most common local assignment options, most commonly used local assignment options. There are tons of them, though, in the education code. And so this is not all-inclusive. The CalSAAS system will have an option of choosing other and typing in your local assignment option, your education code that something falls under. So if it's not one of these commonly used ones, it's okay. You can still put it into the system. This cheat sheet gives you a hyperlink to the education code or Title V regulation for that local assignment option. It tells you so that you can read the full text of the local assignment option yourself. I always recommend that you read the text of any local assignment option you're using. This is a cheat sheet only. It does not give you the full information on each local assignment option. It tells you the base credential. What credential does someone need to hold for them to be able to use this local assignment option? It tells you the content verification. So do you need to check the teacher for certain units on transcripts in order for them to be assigned under this local assignment option? So remember, local assignment options are for fully credentialed teachers. They're already individuals who hold full credentials. It can't be for someone who's on a STIP or a PIP to serve outside of their area. It can't be someone who's on an intern credential to serve outside their area. It can't be someone who isn't credentialed at all to be brought in to teach. It's someone who's fully credentialed with a multiple subject or single subject or education specialist teaching credential usually, though there's some exceptions to that. If it says a BA in student teaching, credential based on BA in student teaching, it means a multiple subject, single subject, or education specialist. Career technical education credential is not based on a BA in student teaching. An adult education credential is not based on a BA in student teaching. So that's why it says that in the base credential area. It tells you whether there needs to be board action, governing board action. So if it says resolution, there needs to be governing board action. It cannot be a consent item. It tells you if there needs to be a board policy approved. I gave you an advisory document in your Padlet on how to create a board policy for these local assignment options that you're seeing here, 44258.3 and 44258.7 C and D. So it's an actual very comprehensive process to create a board policy that allows you to do these two local assignment options. It tells you the setting that the teacher can serve in, departmentalized or self-contained, or in some cases in an alternative education setting like under 44865 right here. It tells you the grade level that they can teach at in the local assignment option, and tells you what content they can teach under the local assignment option. Most of them, most local assignment options are for any content. Sometimes it's just for elective content, though. Okay, so that is the local assignment options that you can access on the Padlet. Now we're going to go to what the new system is going to look like. Now this is not the pretty version of the system. This is not all the bells and whistles. This is just a sort of a rough sketch of how the system might look and function. The first thing to know about the system is there's always going to be a dashboard for any user. And you can see up here at the top right-hand corner that this happens to be the county or the monitoring authority administrator's dashboard. So this is going to be with the most amount of tabs of anybody because they have the most amount of permissions of anybody. And there'll be different looking dashboards depending on what type of user you are. So when I get to my dashboard, I have tabs up here at the top that let me quickly get to different parts of my work. I have ways to filter my work over here on the left. And then I have here in the center sort of a quick view of my work. So right now, every single school and district is checked on this example. So this is Alameda County, and this is the county administrator looking at Alameda County. And so in Alameda County, there were 245 exceptions identified in the monitored schools. And so out of those 245 exceptions that were identified, 200 of those were provided determinations by the LEA, and 45 of them still have yet to be determined by the LEA. So the monitoring authority of the county has the ability to work on reviewing the determinations of 200 of the assignments that were identified as exceptions in the CalSAAS system. They still have to wait on 45. But they have the ability, as they get down to the wire, of contacting the district and knowing which 45 have yet to be worked on. If they click on the hyperlink, it's going to take them to the direct list of the misassignments that have been the assignments that have been identified as exceptions by educator and the information for them in detail. Or if they go to determine the same thing, it'll be those exceptions that have determinations provided for them. So it can take them right to their work directly. So down below are some of the drop-downs on the determination reasons. So when I'm providing a determination or an explanation on those exceptions as an LEA, I have a drop-down of choices. And so one of the choices is always going to be other with a type-in field, but course setting is one of my options to say this is really justified because it's part of a course setting. Local assignment options, one of my drop-downs. And if I choose local assignment options, for example, it's going to give me another drop-down where it asks me to pick one of the most common local assignment options or other and do a type-in. So it gives me different justification or termination reasons, once again, and other for me typing in my own reason. It sorts them between appropriate assignment and misassignment, which could have been reasons provided by the LEA, but it also could be what the monitoring authority of the county has changed it to. So let's say somebody says something's a course setting, they provide the master schedule, you look at it and you say, no, this is not actually an appropriate course setting, and you move it to a misassignment. So it changes the numbers. Once again, these are hyperlinks. They're blue, so if I click on it, I'm going to go just to my course settings. So if I want to say, I just want to go to everything the district has said is a course setting, I can come over here to my left. I can say, okay, I want to just look at Alameda Unified. So I'm going to unclick my boxes, click just Alameda Unified. It's going to change all my numbers in my dashboard, so I'm just showing monitored exceptions for Alameda Unified. And then I'm going to see what's been determined by Alameda Unified, what's been undetermined. I'm going to see how they've been determined. So I see that 30 of Alameda Unifieds were identified as course setting assignments. I can click on course setting assignments, and I can just say to those ones, I can return them back to Alameda Unified and say, I want to see your master schedules for those 30. Or I can return 20% of those 30 back to them and say, I want to take a look at master schedules for this 20%. So as a monitoring authority, I have the authority of determining what documentation I want to see to ensure that the justification provided is accurate. So if that means that I decide I want documentation on local assignment options for every single one, I want to see the board authorization, then I can ask for it. I can click click on my local assignment options, and I can get the full list, and I can hit return to LEA and put all of them down as a batch that I want them returned because I want to see the governing board minutes. But if I decide that I want to randomly select 20% of them to audit and say I want to see the governing board minutes for that 20%, I can do that too. And if I don't like what I'm seeing on the 20% coming back and it looks like their paperwork is not in good shape, I can then go back and request it for all of them because I have that 90 days to do that. We collect CTC data here, that teaching work for statutory leave. We do that in the current credential system too, even though those aren't misassignments. It's an area where we have to report the data, so that's collected in this system. And then there's county reported misassignments. So in the education code, anyone has the ability to report a misassignment. So if it doesn't come in through CalSAAS, but a teacher says they've been misassigned by their administrator, maybe it didn't come out because maybe something wasn't accurately reported in the process, the county is required to investigate anything that's been reported to them directly and make a determination. And then they have to report any of those independent investigations to the commission here in this dashboard. Okay, so here I am up at my top, and I want to go to the actual individual exceptions to do my work, because I'm not going to really get my work done here in the dashboard. This is a quick view of my work and a navigation tool. So I click on my exceptions tab. It's going to take me to an individual records tab where I have a search function up here where I can search by a teacher's first name, a teacher's last name, their seed number. I can search by a CDS code for a school. I can search by a school name if I just want to look at certain schools. I still have my, my ability to filter over here on the left, but I have search capabilities up here at the top. So I can look at an individual teacher's exception and have their first and last name, their seed, their CDS. It'll say the school site name. It'll give us the status, the type of exception it is, details on that exception, and then the determination that's been put in by the LEA. You'll have additional information on that exception as well that you can see down below. You can sort things by the explanation provided. If I want to just go in here and sort by seeing only course settings, I can filter it just by course settings or just by local assignment options. So these are all filters that I can put into place. I can go here, up here, I can look at just those exceptions that have been returned to the district. So if I, as a county, have decided that I'm returning determinations that have been made by the LEA, by that district, back to them for additional documentation like those governing board minutes, I can go and see what I've returned to them and if I've had any action on those returned district exceptions. So let's just quickly take one quick look. Let's go ahead and go to what it looks like on the LEA user. So we looked at the monitoring authority, that MA administrator, that's sort of the top level who has the most capabilities, permissions, if you will. And this would be someone with the least amount of permissions, the LEA user, not the administrator, the user. And so you can see they have much fewer tabs here, so they have less work that they're, actions they're capable of taking. Things are now assigned schools rather than assigned districts because you are the district. You still have a dashboard. Every single person, whether they're a user or administrator, whether they're the LEA or the MA, all of them have a dashboard so they can look at their work and they can flow through their work. And all of these dashboards, the numbers will change based on how I filter my data. So up here you see a tab that says Assigned Schools Dashboard and All Schools Dashboard. So every user has work that's been assigned to them by their administrator. So maybe I've been assigned Albany High School by my administrator, and that's what I'm working on. But I also have the ability to look at all schools. So I have read-only function on all schools in my district so that I can answer questions if they come in by phone or something like that. But I can only edit and work and provide justifications or determinations on those that have been assigned to me by my administrator. So that is a view at the new CalSAAS system in its simple form. And now we're going to go ahead and take some questions. I have one question that came in. It says, please go over how CalSAAS will be rolled out for charter schools. Charter schools will not be in the CalSAAS system. It's still going to be county district users. The county and district, if they're the chartering authority, will be monitoring. They'll not only be the chartering authority, they'll be the monitoring authority for that charter school. The charter schools will be inside of the CalSAAS, and it will still be pulling that CDE CalPADS data and the CTC certification data. It will still be comparing the two. It will still be generating exceptions for those charter schools, and you'll be able to filter here on the left-hand side for that specific charter school. But they will function just like any other school, just like Albany High School won't be inside of the CalSAAS system, but Albany City Unified will be the one that's actually in the CalSAAS system doing the work. So the same is true for, let's say there's Albany Charter High School. They would be one of the schools listed under Albany City Unified. They would not be in the system themselves. That would be the district, but the district would be able to view the exceptions for that charter school and work them. So that's how charter schools will work in the CalSAAS system. How should independent study schools participate? So independent study schools are going to be like all other school types. They are alternative education school sites. They have a very convenient local assignment option that covers most of their assignments that will be used a lot on their drop-down. It's Education Code 44865. It allows any fully credentialed teacher that's based on a BA in student teaching to teach outside of their credential area. So the CalSAAS system, if they have a correct credential for what they're teaching in independent study, it's not going to have any findings. But if there's a mismatch, it's going to come up as an exception, and then the local assignment option for it would be that 44865. And so once again, that's going to be the independent study school that falls under the district. The district's going to put in the justification of the local assignment option. Who will receive notification for the CalSAAS access? So the first notification that goes out will be to the monitoring authority administrator, and that's going to be your county office credential analyst. The credential analyst of the county office who's been identified by the commission as the primary point of contact for that county. So we have a list of each primary credential analyst at each county, and the commission will be sending out private invitations with permissions already set for that county administrator, that monitoring authority or MA administrator. And once that monitoring authority administrator has been invited and they go in and set up their user profile, they would then be able to invite other county users, so other MA users, and they would also be able to invite the district administrator or that LEA administrator. The LEA administrator then would be able to invite the LEA user. So more on charter schools. Who's the LEA? So the LEA is the chartering authority. Who's the monitoring authority? Well, the monitoring authority and the LEA, I guess you could say, okay, so the monitoring authority in some cases will be the same as the LEA. So the monitoring authority is not going to be the county. That's why there's a direct report that we talked about when we talked about the LEA having one reporting directly to the commission, and that's the charter school ability. So if they are the chartering authority, they serve as the LEA and the MA all in one function. It's really just comes straight from the LEA function. Who is on charter schools, can charter schools be a tester? Charter schools can connect with their chartering authority to see if they can be part of the CalSAAS testing process. And what does consequential mean? So in 1920, it will be non-consequential, meaning that it's just a test that we all get to look at the data together and say, here's where we see problems, here's where we need to fix the system, here's what our workload looks like. After the 1920 school year, consequential means that all monitoring that's mandated under the education code for the state will have to come through the CalSAAS system. So it will be mandatory that all assignment monitoring be generated. The exceptions, the misassignments, are identified through the CalSAAS system. CalSAAS is a communication platform, so it's not just that it identifies those potential misassignments, those exceptions, but it's also a method for the LEA and the MA, the county and the district, to communicate with each other about those exceptions. And exceptions, when they are generated by the CalSAAS system and they're loaded into the CalSAAS system for viewing, while the work occurs first with the LEA to justify those exceptions, they're immediately viewable at the same time by both the LEA and the MA. So both the monitoring authority and the local education agency can both view all exceptions at the same time. It's just that the monitoring authority wouldn't touch those until after the justifications are provided by the LEA. Another important thing to note, as the LEA, if you choose not to do the work in the CalSAAS system, if you have the exceptions that are loaded up into the CalSAAS system and you choose not to justify any of them, any exceptions that have not been determined, have not been provided justification for by the LEA, immediately become misassignments. So if during that 60-day time frame no justification is provided, those become automatically misassignments. When will we know who our LEA administrator is, and can we have only one? Oh, that's a good question. You can have more than one administrator. So I know at some of our counties we happen to have at one county 2 administrators who job share the lead role. And some of our districts, I happen to know another district that has 2 lead administrators as well. So there can be an unlimited number of administrators if you want people to have more authority among your users. They can have more than one administrator. Who do you know? How are you going to know who the LEA administrator is? That's going to be determined by the LEA and shared with the MA, the county office, so that they can invite the right people. Okay, I think, do we have any other questions for today, or are we good to go?
We have a couple more.
Oh, we have a couple more questions.
Yes. An easy one is, how does this apply to home study?
How does this apply to home study? So I believe that home study falls under what we talked about under 44865, that alternative education setting, so that a teacher, as long as they're a fully credentialed teacher that's based on a BA in student teaching, they can teach outside of their credential area any subject to a home study student.
Okay.
So home hospital also, that would be true. That's another one. County court schools, that would be true. So all of that is, all of those are alternative education settings. So remember when I said to you, always go and read the actual language of the education code. So if you go to 44865 in the education code, you will see the list of each type of alternative education setting that allows that type of flexibility, where it can be any fully credentialed teacher can teach anything.
All right. This is kind of broad, but we've had some special education questions. Is there something that we can provide right now, aside from the fact that, yes, special education is being addressed in assignment monitoring broadly?
So the question was, how are special education assignments addressed within the CalSAAS system?
Yeah.
So yes, actually we pulled data from CDE on the primary. This is actually a really good question. I wish I had addressed in other sessions, so good job whoever asked this. So remember I said that we're not pulling just the CalPADS course assignment data, we have other data points. So one of the other data points that we're pulling from CDE data is the primary disability category of every student enrolled in a class. So if it's a special day class, that departmentalized special education classroom, every single primary disability category of the student in that special day class is noted for that teacher, and then the education specialist credential has an authorization that tells us what primary disability categories that teacher can teach. And so it's going to match it up and see if they can teach each of the students that are enrolled in their class. And if not, it will come up as a misassignment for that particular type of disability category. So that's how special education misassignments are identified. So it is possible for one class to have more than one misassignment if you're looking at primary disability categories of students. Any other questions?
Okay. So just to clarify for folks, would you repeat how 2019 and 20 is now going to be a non-consequential year, and the first consequential year is going to be 2021, right?
Right. So 1920, once again, is a non-consequential year. That means the system will be up and running, and if you signed up as a tester, you'll be able to see the results, you'll be able to engage with the system, you'll be able to do everything in the system that you're going to do in the future, but it's not going to, so assignment monitoring still happens in the 1920 school year, but it happens in the way that it's occurring right now, where you are doing your paper monitoring of the process. So in 1920, you're going to do your normal paper monitoring, but if you choose to sign up as a tester, you'll be able to also see the results that come out in CalSAAS and engage in the CalSAAS system between the county and the district. So it's a non-consequential year in the sense that that data is not being reported to CDE for federal reporting purposes, and we don't, because we cannot guarantee that every single user is going to use it, it can't be good data. It's going to be data just based on the number of individuals that choose to participate. So that's what we mean by non-consequential. The following year will be consequential, meaning the CalSAAS system is required as to be engaged in for assignment monitoring. And if you choose not to engage in the CalSAAS system, everything that's identified as an exception will become a misassignment. And that's how it will be reported for your district and county and school site, both to the feds and for purposes of all other areas where misassignments are reported out, like in the LCAP. Any other questions?
A few more charter school, like small questions. How will communication work? Is it up to the authorizer to contact the charter school, or should the charter be contacting the authorizer?
It's up to the authorizer to contact the charter school in the end as part of this process. But good communication happens in a two-way process. So if you are a charter school, it is absolutely a good idea to be proactive and to contact your chartering authority, and particularly if they're there with you in your training, and make a connection so they know who you are, so that they know who to contact for the new monitoring process. So as a charter school, if a lot of districts and counties choose to do annual monitoring anyway of their charter schools, or they choose to put them on their 1/4 monitoring schedule, and they monitor them just the same as anyone else now. Others don't, because it says periodic review, so it doesn't mandate how often it occurs. So it depends on the charter school as to how much involvement your chartering authorities had in the past with your assignment monitoring.
Roxanne, a couple nuts and bolts questions. First, in addressing potential misassignments exceptions, will the folks go back into CalSAAS after CalSAAS reveals the exceptions, or it's all within CalSAAS?
No, once you've done your CalSAAS reporting and that Fall 2 data has come out in April, that's it. It's a done deal. You can't go back in and change the CalSAAS data. It's reported to the commission. So you will not go in and change your CalSAAS data. You'll just provide explanations. And so sometimes that explanation is going to be other in explaining that there was a wrong CalSAAS code entered and what it should have been. So additional information will be provided to the county, and justification and documentation can be provided to support that claim. And then you want to then take your results from that monitoring of that year and bring it forward into the next year so you don't have the same errors coming into the next year, which is why we have the non-consequential year.
Thank goodness. All right. This is about what sort of accounts an independently reporting charter, let's say one that's authorized by district, is going to receive specifically, will their authorizer receive an MA admin account to create charter LEA admin accounts?
So the charter school would not directly be in the CalSAAS system. Once again, the charter school will not be directly in the CalSAAS system. If the LEA school district is the chartering authority, the LEA serves in a dual role as their own monitoring authority. There's not a secondary piece to that for the charter schools. They have the ability to direct report the assignment monitoring results and exceptions and determinations that have been made directly to the commission just for the charter schools. And if the monitoring authority is the chartering authority, they have a direct reporting ability for just the charter schools too, and there wouldn't be a back and forth where they would have an LEA provide information. So the back and forth between the charter school and the chartering authority would occur outside of the CalSAAS system. What occurs in the CalSAAS system is the determination of the exceptions for that charter school and being able to isolate those out by the charter school. But the reporting comes directly from the chartering authority.
I have a very specific local assignment options question, or one that does not require the school board's authority, the school board's authorization to use. What kind of documentation is needed?
Okay. So first of all, let me say that any request for documentation is up to the monitoring authority to determine what they need to see in order for them to determine something's an appropriate assignment. So if they need to see the governing board minutes, if they need to see transcripts, if they need to see a master schedule, that's all decided on by the monitoring authority. We can guide you as to what would commonly be asked for, and you have the ability as an LEA to batch upload things, so you don't have to wait for things to be requested. You can just say, I'm doing these local assignment options. I have one governing board minute statement that have all of my local assignment options were all done at the same time in the same meeting. I can batch upload that to multiple teachers with my one governing board statement so that I don't have to do it individually. So I have the ability to do that. So for local assignment options, what kind of documentation do you need? It depends on what your monitoring authority wants. Maybe they just want to see the governing board minutes. Maybe they just want to see the governing board minutes, and they also want to see the transcripts to see if they have the units. It's up to them to decide what documentation they're going to request from you. If it's one like 44865, where no governing board minutes are necessary, then there's no units necessary on that one either, then maybe it's just the drop down of 44865 and no documentation is needed. So at that point, the monitoring authority can determine if the credential held by that educator is one based on the BA in student teaching, which is what the one requirement would be for that local assignment option. So not every single determination requires documentation. And even when it does require documentation, it's not necessary that the monitoring authority request documentation on each of them. They can choose to do a percentage, for example, an audit, if you will.
Will charter schools have a user account, an MA user account?
No, charter schools will not have a user account or administrator account. The chartering authority will be the one with the account. The chartering authority will be the one to interact with the charter school. Any other questions?
There's a lot of specific questions that pertain to the training on the CalSAAS updates that are not part of this webinar today. So those can be addressed by us a little bit later in an email update, I guess.
So there's some specific questions that came in on the CalSAAS training that are specific to CalSAAS training that aren't being addressed in this particular webinar session, and those will be addressed later by CDE through individual emails, it looks like.
But just a reminder, we are doing the office hours every Monday from 1 to 2, except for holidays. And so we do updates during those sessions and answer questions during those sessions as well on CalSAAS or PEAT or CalSAAS.
Right, so if you leave here and you think, now I've thought of a question, because you'll go back to tonight and you'll be sleeping in your bed and you'll be sitting there on your pillow and you'll be thinking about it and then it'll pop into your head. So come to the office hours. Ask your question. Okay, with that, it looks like our session is done. Thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully you got something out of this, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.
Thanks.